I think it's important to talk to everyone, even people that you hate or that you think you hate. I try to reserve my hate for ideas and policies. I actually don't think I hate anyone. There are definitely people that I dislike, but hate, no. To hate someone is a pretty strong feeling. Like, I imagine if you really hated someone, you're at that point that you would want to kill them. And clearly, there are some very sad and hateful people in the world because we see killings every day. Or just look at the way people celebrated after Charlie Kirk's assassination. All the people that made the celebratory videos, those people are full of hate and sadness. Although I can make the assumption those people think they're really open minded and are all about love and peace. And I imagine that I wouldn't have much in common with a person that celebrated Charlie Kirk's death. But I would never advocate to silence them, to cancel them, or to tell them that they didn't have a right to express their views or opinions. Those people should be engaged. They should be pushed on their opinions, challenged on their beliefs, forced to explain their positions. And that's exactly what Charlie Kirk did. Prior to September 10th, I had limited knowledge of Charlie Kirk. I knew who he was. I'd seen some YouTube videos of him debating kids on campus. I'd received mail from Turning Point attempting to solicit donations and money, but I never donated to their organization. Although I do still have about 5 or 6 pocket constitutions that they sent. And I can't I can never bring myself to throw away a constitution. I keep them around the house, keep one in my car. I've given them to my son. Hopefully maybe he'll just get interested in it one day, and there it is. The point is, I know who Charlie Kirk was, but wasn't necessarily a big fan. But when he got shot, I was really upset. Like, I was really upset. I was distraught. And I couldn't figure out why. I mean, aside from the fact that the video was horrific, and I've seen a lot of horrible things. I've seen a lot of horrible, images, videos. I've seen a lot of horrible things in real life. Probably a lot more than most people. But I think I was upset because here was a guy that just wanted to have a conversation. He wanted to have a debate, and someone decided to say the conversation is over. And when you get to that point, when the conversation is over, when you're saying diplomacy has failed, that's how wars start. And thank God so far there hasn't been like any extremist action in return for the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I think I was worried that that's where we were and things were going to escalate, seriously into a civil war. I mean, you looked at the people that were celebrating it, and then the people on the other side that were saying, they've taken it too far. The time to act is now. I mean, we're still not out of the woods yet. Our country is extraordinarily divided, and pushing to silence or cancel people that you don't agree with, that's a dangerous move. That's what freedom of speech is all about. People being free to say things that you don't like and you don't agree with. The First Amendment is to protect unpopular speech. If it was popular, it doesn't need to be protected. Which brings me to the latest target of the right's attempt to silence critics, Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson just did a podcast with Nick Fuentes, and people on the right are furious. How could you platform Nick? He's anti Semitic. He's hateful. All the typical insults that they launch against critics of Israel. But do you think it's better to engage someone like Nick Fuentes, challenge his ideas, and hopefully expose the flaws in his beliefs so that people will recognize where he's wrong? Or do you think it's better to silence him, ignore him, cancel him, so that his ideas and beliefs can be pushed down to the dark corners of the internet where they can stew and simmer and radicalize some misinformed, misguided individual or a group of individuals. And then they'll look at the mainstream media and how they've silenced Nick and tried to suppress those ideas. And that just further reinforces their beliefs that there's a coordinated conspiracy against them. Trying to act like people with opposing views don't exist will not solve any problems. You should talk to and listen to everyone. And if you haven't listened to the Tucker Fuentes podcast, you should check it out. It was very interesting, especially knowing the history between Tucker and Nick. You know, I enjoy listening to both of those guys, you know, Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes. Not because I agree with them on everything, but they're both very articulate. They're both very knowledgeable and believable. And what I mean by believable isn't that I believe everything that they say, but I do think they believe in what they're saying, which I can appreciate living in a world where everyone seems to be political all the time, saying what they think people want to hear, always trying to be methodical and crafting everything that they want to say, not just saying what they really think. You know, and, you know, speaking of exposing things about people, you know, like when Tucker was talking to Nick, they brought up the date. I'm pretty sure it was December 18th. And Nick Fuentes was saying like, oh yeah, December 18th, that's a special day to me. And Tucker said, well, why is that a special day to you? And Nick Fuentes says, well, that's Joseph Stalin's birthday. And, you know, anybody that knows anything about history knows about, you know, Stalin and his purges and his authoritarian, you know, regime and all the people that he killed in Russia. And, you know, Tucker said they were going to get back to it. And I don't think they ever circled back to it. And I'd really like to know the insight there as to why Nick Fuentes has some type of affinity for Joseph Stalin. Because, you know, I tend to would say Joseph Stalin was a terrible leader. And, you know, again, but that's unless you want to hash that out or listen to that, then it's hard to expose people and the flaws of their views. You know what I mean? And like that would be a great thing, you know, if Nick comes out and, you know, talks about how he supports authoritarianism and, you know, like Joseph Stalin. Well, that would be, you know, that'd be a great point that you could make to be like, hey, you know, Nick, you're wrong. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of things that he says and, you know, examples of, you know, some of the racist things he said about black people and like, you know, how he really goes with the identity politics thing. But yeah, like I said, like getting to understand where people are coming from and what their belief systems are, that's the best way to try to, you know, either like debunk what they're saying or, you know, at least make a better counter argument so that you win in the arena of ideas. There used to be this guy on YouTube named Chris Dwayne, and he did these a couple of series. One of them was called the Sons of Liberty Academy, and the other one was the Silver Bullet, Silver Shield series. They were both really great. But he used to always say, listen to all and follow none. And I've loved that quote ever since I heard him say it. And I've tried to base my entire approach to, you know, everything, to economics, to politics, everything. I try to listen to everybody, make my own decisions of what I believe based on, you know, what I know from having listened to everybody, listening to every side. And then I make up my own ideas and my own views about what I believe. You know, you have to listen to everyone because if you're only listening to people that you agree with, you end up in an echo chamber. You keep reinforcing your views and never really challenge yourself to grow. You know, you end up with a confirmation bias. And when you do end up with somebody that has opposing views that can challenge your beliefs, you're much more likely to shut down or get upset. You know, that's why you kind of need to, it's almost like training, you know, like you want to train yourself to be able to handle any situation. And if you've never, you know, really explored all of these other ideas and concepts, then you can't really explain why they're wrong. You know, talking with everyone, even the people that you think you hate, is exactly what we need in this country. And we need to be able to do that without getting emotional. Because whenever we do stop talking and the conversation ends, we're that much closer to where the fighting begins.